Hey, it's Patricia Murphy. It's Wednesday. This is Seattle Now. We don't talk tax policy all that often on this show. Don't bail. There's a proposal in Olympia you want to know about. It might change the state's regressive tax structure. KUOW Olympia correspondent Austin Jenkins will explain in a minute. But first, let's get you caught up. Teachers, school staff, and childcare workers have gotten the green light to get themselves vaccinated. Governor Inslee has resisted prioritizing teachers until now. But yesterday, President Biden directed the states to do it by the end of the month. So we're doing it. It comes as many school districts around the state, including Seattle, are negotiating with teachers' unions over returning to the classroom. The head of the state teachers' union said Tuesday the news should help build trust and confidence as schools start to reopen. Seattle's Parks Department plans to clear an encampment at Denny Park this morning. The city posted notice earlier this week and says it will remove all structures today and offer services to the dozen or so people who've been living there. Seattle police say they'll be on hand, but SPD hasn't been taking part in the sweeps since the city council pulled them back last fall. And hope you're enjoying the sunshine these past few days. According to the National Weather Service, today will be the sunniest day all week. Don't worry, that glorious Seattle gray will be back in full force by Friday. P.S. We're 2 days away from the return of 6 p.m. sunsets. For 6 years in a row now, Democrats in Olympia have tried to pass a tax on capital gains. This year, it looks like it might actually happen. Washington may be headed for a more progressive tax system. Austin Jenkins has been following the tax as it makes its way through the legislature. He's the Northwest News Network's Olympia correspondent. Hey, Austin.
Hello. How are you?
Good. Thanks for doing this. Capital gains tax gets thrown around a lot, and it just sails right by people's heads. So give us the basics. What exactly is a capital gains tax?
That might be because most people don't pay the capital gains tax.
Right.
So a capital gains tax is the tax on profit realized from the sale of non-inventory assets. It's essentially you've bought something, you've watched the value go up, it's an investment, and then you sell it for a gain. It's the tax you would pay on the sale of stocks and bonds, mutual funds, from real estate sales. Under the current version in the legislature, it's a 7% tax on capital gains over $250,000. So someone's first $250,000 in capital gains would be tax-free, and then the tax would kick in after that.
Okay, let's go through some of the specifics. Who's going to pay this tax?
So under the version of the bill that's moving right now here in Olympia, the sponsor says it would be paid by just 2% of the state's wealthiest residents. It looks like about 8,000 taxpayers in Washington. So it really does hit a pretty small universe of people. And that's one of the selling points for Democrats. They say this is a tax on wealthy people, not on everyday people.
Right. Okay. So you and me not paying this tax, and it actually targets a very, very small percentage of the population. What about exceptions?
There are several exemptions to this bill, including all real estate and retirement account assets. Ag lands that meet certain requirements would be exempt, as well as timber and timberlands. There's also a deduction for family-owned businesses that gross less than $6 million a year. As this bill has moved through the process, it's gotten narrower and narrower, not broader and broader.
Okay. If it goes through as it's written, how much money would it raise?
I'm going to say this with the caveat that what you will often hear about the capital gains tax is it's quite volatile and it changes from year to year. But the working assumption is that by 2025, it might be bringing in around $500 million a year, $500 million a year. So, it's not a ton of money for the state to work with.
Yeah, but that's not chump change. Where would that go, Austin?
So as written now, the bill would dedicate the first $350 million each year that came in from this to the state's Education Legacy Trust account, which is generally a bucket that supports public schools, but that can also include childcare and early learning, which is something that majority Democrats are talking a lot about and saying that needs to be a priority. And then the remainder would be deposited into a new taxpayer relief account, which is sort of this amorphous thing. We're not really sure what it is or how it would work, but you can tell by the title that the idea is that somehow they'd be thinking about using some of the proceeds to offset taxes in other places. So maybe, for instance, by funding the earned income tax credit for lower income families or reducing taxes elsewhere.
All right, I'm hearing a couple of things that people are talking about, education being one of them. Traditionally, this has been a pretty tough sell in Washington state. Where is the pushback coming from right now?
Well, a lot of pushback from Republicans who say this is essentially the camel's nose under the tent, that maybe it's only 8,000 taxpayers in 2023, but maybe it gets expanded in future years, and we're all paying it.
So tax creep.
Tax creep, exactly. Then you're also hearing this idea that it's an income tax, not an excise tax, and therefore is unconstitutional. And by the way, if this passes, it is almost certain to face a court test. So they're saying it's unconstitutional, it's an income tax, and it's coming for you, the everyday taxpayer.
Okay, that is the pushback. But in reality, this is getting some traction right now. So what's different? It's the 6th year in a row that Democrats have tried to get this capital gains tax through, and it has failed every time. Why is now the right time?
There's a couple things going on. One is sort of a raw politics thing, which is that this has generally been promoted in the Washington House, but it hasn't had the votes to pass in the state Senate. That appears to have changed with a couple of change-outs in the makeup of the Senate Democratic caucus after last year's election. So they now may, in fact, have the 25 votes they need to pass this, whereas before they didn't. The other thing that is clearly happening is that Democrats are really leaning into this idea of tax fairness because of the pandemic. And they're saying that the pandemic has revealed disparities and inequities that were already there. And in essence, they don't want to waste this crisis to, from their perspective, invest in things like childcare for the future, to really be looking to the future as opposed to just dealing with the immediate crisis and balancing the budget. So they're very much looking at this tax as a way to fund future priorities and to address what they have long said is an upside-down tax structure in the state.
This is something I hear a lot about how regressive our tax code is. What does that really mean, Austin? Again, for the guy in the back.
Well, what it means is that the lowest income Washingtonians are paying nearly 20% of their earnings in taxes, while the top 1% pay like 3% of their earnings in taxes. So that's what Democrats mean when they say upside down, that the burden of our tax code is disproportionately on those lower income earners. And what Democrats would say is essentially rich people, when it comes to state taxes, are kind of skating free.
It's expensive to be poor. I hear that expression a lot. What would it mean if this passes? It seems like it's a big deal in addition to the money.
It would be a really big deal, partly because, as you note, it's been percolating for several years or marinating. This is a new tax. This isn't just raising an existing tax or playing around with the knobs on the current taxes we have. This is actually establishing a brand new tax that exists at the federal level, to be clear, and in many states, but not in Washington. I think also just philosophically, it would really represent a win for advocates on the left who have been pushing for so long to do this and to focus on trying to tax wealthier Washingtonians. They've wanted this, and so if this goes through, this becomes a major, major victory for them.
What's next, Austin? What should we be looking for?
We should be looking to see if the state Senate brings the capital gains tax to the floor for a vote in the coming days. If that happens, that is going to be significant. It will tell you that this has momentum and legs and looks like it's really going to happen. If it doesn't come to a vote pretty quickly and languishes, then we're going to kind of have to wait and see. It may signal that it's losing support. It may also signal that Democrats just kind of want to see what happens with the March revenue forecast and if they can sell the idea, even if the state is kind of flush with cash when all is said and done.
All right, Austin, we will stay in touch. KUOW's Olympia correspondent, Austin Jenkins, thanks a lot.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Seattle Now is produced by Clare McGrane, Caroline Chamberlain Gomez, and Jason Pagano. Matt Jorgensen does our music. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you tomorrow.